Hello, it's PeeMonster. Today I'm going to be working on my third Necro, this gentleman here. So this is the third installment of my Necro series. It's a piece from somewhere around or within 15 years ago that was stored away and found, and I decided I was going to finish some of these pieces. The first one we had was Francis, and then we had Belina, and now we're going to have this gentleman. He is unnamed. I don't see a title here, so we're going to have some fun creating a name for him. I think for the most part this piece has already been mapped out, so it shouldn't be too hard to fill in and really get to know him. So yeah, as always, at the end of this video, you'll be able to see the completed version side by side with the old version before pre-Necro. And today I would like to discuss something that is valuable to me, and I want to share it with other people who might possibly be having the same struggles. And that is having boundaries as an empathetic person. So let me start by saying I'm a person who is empathetic to a fault. I guess in some cases they would refer to that as an empath, meaning you feel very deeply the feelings of others around you, and there's a lot of empathy for others who might be struggling, etc. And like I said, empathetic to a fault, meaning saying yes and giving and giving and giving to people before yourself, to the point where things that you value get minimized, and to the point where there's no you left, basically. So I think someone like me, in my younger years, I had a tendency to do that a lot. Like, I would give. I never wanted to say no to anybody. And I'm not just talking about like monetary, I'm more talking about just being a complete pushover and not having a sense of my own values and boundaries socially. So I'm going to need to sharpen these pencils. So one of my earliest memories in my childhood, sorry, camera's shaking. One of the earliest memories of my childhood, and I don't have many because I think I just wasn't conscious until a much older age. I remember sitting in the classroom in a circle, and my teacher was teaching us how to say no. So essentially what she was doing was she was going around the circle of kids and saying, "Give me your shoes," and your job as a kid was to say no. And so she went around the circle, and she finally got to me and said, "Give me your shoes." And I remember just sitting there. I didn't say no. I didn't say yes. I just sat there completely silent. And I remember thinking, in my child thoughts, it's like, I can't say no. Not because I want to be kind, but I don't know. I don't know what the logic is behind it. It's not that I just kind of felt like I didn't want to say no. I mean, I wanted to do the assignment, but the word could not come out of my mouth. And so hopefully that can give you an idea of what I mean. So over the past few years, it's something that I had to learn. I had to learn to develop boundaries with empathy within boundaries. Those boundaries being things that I value, things that I find important, things that rely on me in order to be upheld or maintained. And so something happened recently. I won't go into any detail, but it was a situation where I had to really put my foot down despite empathizing with somebody, with someone else's struggles. I feel like in being able to do that, I've come very far, considering the internal struggle of saying no to somebody. But it's something that with time and practice, I think we tend to get better at. And I also think a factor is, I think it tends to hurt more in the long run once we've invested our empathy into someone that turns around and exploits it. So yeah, that pain could lead to tremendous growth, self-discovery, etc. But anyway, on to the main part of this. I wanted to give some insight or tips or whatever you want to call it to others who might have that struggle. Because it is a battle. It's like years worth of a battle to be able to say no. It's totally okay to say no. The best thing that you can do as an empathetic person is learn to say no. Take a moment. If you would like to learn to say no, oh, it's broken. I think if you would like to learn to say no, what you must first do is learn what you value. You can just name some things off in your head or make a list if you're the type of person that needs to see things written like I am. You write it down. These are the things that I value. This is the most important things to me in my life. The list may start out small at first, but I think over time, and it could be over weeks, months, years, just keep adding to the list things that you value if that's what helps you sort out the difference between empathy and overdoing it. So, say my list says my children, my household, my relationship. Those things are stuff that I value. Not in that order, of course. I think they're all pretty important to me. For example, those are some of the things that I value. I value creativity. I value time to be able to create. And so once you establish the things that you value, you learn to protect those things. Stop for a moment and think about what it takes to protect those things. Realize that those things need you to be able to say no to things that do not serve them, or things that do not uphold them or enhance them. So for me, over the years, I've become very protective of those things. I'm very protective of my children. I'm very protective of my household. I'm very protective of my relationship. So when you have those things established, if someone comes up to you and asks a certain thing of you, which you typically would say yes to and then kind of suffer through until it's over, even if you don't suffer through it, if it's something you would typically say yes to, but in the end it ends up compromising something or the things that you value, or has the potential to compromise those things, stop. Think about it. You don't have to say yes. You don't have to say yes. You don't. Stop, think about it. Calculate in your mind, okay, can I afford to say yes to this request? Will it mean that I won't be able to attend Steven's soccer game? Your son Steven. Does it mean that I won't be able to attend Steven's soccer game? Does it mean that the time I have set aside to spend with Steven is going to be compromised because of saying yes to this task? Case by case. The bottom line is you need to know it's okay to say no in those moments, even if the person is standing right in front of you. It's okay to say no. Because at the end of the day, nobody else is going to protect those things on your list that you've established as the things that are most important to you. Nobody is going to defend that if you don't. It's okay to say no. People hear no all the time, and it's no different coming from your mouth. Always consider that they hear no. People hear no all the time. We get no plenty of places, not just from you. If you are an empath and decide to say no for a change, it's not that big of a deal. Now, for someone who, I know it can be a struggle when ultimately your desire is to help people. Like me, I'm a caregiver. I'm a Jungian caregiver archetype. That's my archetype. I'm always trying to take care of people. I'm always asking, are you okay? Do you want water? Do you want juice? I like to make sure people are okay. Even though others might find it weird and peculiar. It's just something that I need to do on this planet. So, I think as a caregiver, we're more inclined to say yes and be okay with it, despite any struggle that it may cause in our lives. We are far more inclined to say yes without second thought, You're more likely to say yes just to help someone else. So this piece was done on illustration board like the others. Not my favorite at this time. Now I use Strathmore 500 Bristol. This is hot press illustration board. And so I'm going to go through with my pencils and just define the edges a little bit because it seems like perhaps over the years or the pencils I was using at the time, they've kind of blurred. The definition between the subject and the background needs a little bit of love. So I'm going to do that. So yeah, it's okay to say no when you are asked to do something or give a favor that you are not comfortable with, or that violates the boundaries that you're trying to establish, or harms the things that you are that you would like to protect or uphold, your values. Another situation is if someone crosses your boundaries, not necessarily asking you a favor, but if you say, hey, I don't want anyone in my studio, but then somebody just happens to walk into your studio and is like, oh, what's that, to be able to tell that person, hey, I'd prefer if you're not in here, or to communicate to them that you don't want them to be in your studio space. It can be challenging, especially if they're enjoying what they see. So, in that case, I think it's important to learn nice ways of saying this is not okay. And being nice doesn't always work toward everyone. Sometimes when you're nice about something, people will think you're not being serious. So there are ways to calmly but firmly state, I don't want you to be in my studio. So one thing you can do is you can establish scripts in your mind. If this is a recurring situation, it's a little bit easier. You don't have to think on a whim. But saying something like, I'm glad you like what you're seeing, but I don't usually let people come in here. That's a nice way. That's a nice way of saying, I don't want you in my studio. If you let someone into your life and that person you discover does not value what you value, it can be a little bit hard to say, okay, you know what, this isn't going to work. Another thing you can say is, I don't typically let people in my studio because there's a lot of stuff around that can fall and get damaged, you know, something like that, like explaining what could happen. I've always had a very hard time with telling people that what they will do might destroy my work. Like even today, I have a hard time. Sometimes, recently someone picked up my work and was just handling it. You know, she had her fingers all over and she's just like, oh, this is really nice, but she's putting her thumbs on it and, you know, like really touching my art, and my heart inside just crumbled a little bit. It was really sad. But I couldn't say anything because I didn't want to say, oh, you're going to mess it up, you know, and she was enjoying the work. And I couldn't bring myself to say anything. And I do this time and time again. I just swallow it and just wait for it to be over. I still do that. I don't know why. I have a very hard time with, you know, it's not that I don't care about my work. I care very deeply, but I think I have a hard time impromptu, like telling people, you know, with certain things, I don't have that problem. You know, certain situations, I will easily speak up nowadays, easily speak up and say, hey, this is not okay. But when it comes to my art, I have a very hard time when people want to interact with it and see it and feel it, and they're just like, oh, did you do this? And it's like, it's smudging the hair, and I can't immediately find the words to tell them, please don't do that. That's something that I need to work on for sure. Absolutely. I mean, that's probably why I just keep my work private for the most part. I'll work around the house, but generally if I'm not around or it's not near me, I try to put it up somewhere high or someplace where, you know, nobody will splash it with water when they're running with their hands wet, you know, from the bathroom. You can say something like, you know, the last time you walked by with your hands wet, you almost splashed my art. You know, don't walk around the house with your hands wet. Or, you know, the last time someone touched my art, it destroyed it. So I try not to let people handle it so much, you know, something like that. But either situation, like saying no or standing up for what your values are, it helps to explain. Or I find it's easier for me to say no or set a boundary when I explain why. So if I don't want someone in my house, I will say, I cannot allow you here because A, B, C, D. You know, give an explanation. That makes it a little bit easier to assert yourself and say no. I think as empaths and caregivers and lovers, you know, whatever you might call yourself, we tend to want to help people, like a lot. I said that already, but I think the desire to help people causes us to let people into our lives that are toxic. We feel like, oh, this person is struggling, they just need a friend, and that someone who understands them, and then I can take care of this person, you know? But I don't think we are really thinking through the amount of ourselves that we're giving away, because chances are we haven't just given it to this person. We are trying to care for all these other people, you know, all of our other friends that need help, you know? And I think there's a tendency to want to help, but there's very little understanding of just how much help is available within us. And so we take on these responsibilities of caring for others, and they come to depend on us, and then we realize we can't truly deliver. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, don't feel obligated to be that person for others. That person. It's not for everybody. You know, here and there you can have some friends who you're that person for, but you can't be that person for everybody. Don't feel obligated to, when someone says something like, oh, I need you. You're the only one that can help me through this. You know, if I don't have you, I'm gonna hurt myself. Those are not situations that you want to take responsibility for. You can't. You absolutely can't. That's not because you're not empathizing with the person that's struggling. It's that you are protecting yourself and your values, and you are knowing your boundaries. You're knowing your limits. If there is a person who is saying to you, I can't do this without you, I need you, if I don't have you, I'm going to hurt myself, chances are they will still say that even if you stick around. They will still struggle with those same struggles the whole duration of your relationship or friendship, because they are not looking within themselves to solve the problem or getting the proper help on the outside. You know, you are not a miracle worker. You are not a therapist. You are just a person that they enjoy having in their life. And I think that it's very vital to understand that saying no to those people from the get-go is not selfish. It's not selfish. You know, you do what you can here and there to help people, but when the request is so unrealistic as to place one's life in someone else's hands who also has their own life, it's extremely toxic. It's not fair, and I believe in some cases it's considered a form of abuse. You can't do that to someone, and you can't allow people to do or say that to you. So, for me, nowadays, I empathize with people who struggle, like, with mental health and etc. But it's so important to know your boundaries in that respect so that you don't end up in an abusive situation or being held to standards that you can't uphold or do not have the energy for. You can't carry the burden of someone else's mental health or suffering while you are trying to deal with your own. You know, if you have something to offer, offer it, but don't feel like you have to adopt a person simply because you feel bad for their struggle. You know, at the end of the day, we're caregivers, we take care of others. We're considerate, we empathize, and we help where we can. But when it comes to spreading yourself too thin, learning to say no is essential. Before you disappear, you run out, you give so much of yourself that there's nothing left for you. A good example would be like charities. You give to the puppy charity, and you give to the kitty charity, and then the whale charity comes along, and you know, you want to give to the whale charity. It's like, okay, I'll give to the whale charity. And then there's a bird charity that comes along, and then everyone wants you to give something, and you don't have enough to give to all. At some point, you have to be able to say, I can't do it. But that does not devalue all of the other charities that you are caring for and investing in, that you're helping out here. You see what I'm saying? Saying no doesn't mean you don't care. It just means you are looking out for yourself and your boundaries. So I think it's also important to understand that once you establish a boundary with somebody, if that person says something like, fine, I can't be your friend anymore, or they just stop contacting you because you failed to do what they want or failed to be that person in their life, you know, whatever it is, if it turns out that that person no longer, you know, speaks to you, or they no longer approach you with their needs, that's okay. Sometimes accepting the loss is far less damaging than allowing a person to tread on your values. And sometimes it's healthier for you to not have certain things or certain people in your safe space, and that's okay. So yeah, overall, it may be hard at first to be able to establish a boundary. Like, nobody wants to be that person. But once you get into it, it will become a lot easier. When you can say aloud the reasons why, that helps so much, like I said before. And I think, yeah, once you start doing it, it'll become easier. So my biggest issue with doing these talk and draws is that I probably won't finish the piece through the talk. I mean, my previous videos were very long, and I don't want them to be that long, so this one is actually going to be pretty short. And it's hard to find a balance between like showing progress in the artwork versus conveying a message through the talk aspect of these videos. You know, I don't quite have the means to do time lapses just yet. I know people like to do the drawing time lapse and then record the voice over, and then, you know, you can watch a whole drawing from start to finish and still cover the topic that you want to talk about. But for me, I don't know, I like this intimacy, just like one-on-one, and we're working and talking at the same time. I don't want to lose that. So what I'm trying to do is draw faster, organize my thoughts, and talk less. And then at the end, you see the completed version. So hopefully you've seen some progress through this piece. I think I'm pretty much done saying what I need to say here. I'm going to be working on a series coming up about how to love yourself, because I think that's very important in not just for empaths, but for everybody. I think the key to avoiding a lot of bad situations or ending up in abusive situations is knowing and loving who you are. That is a huge factor, and I think that actually comes into play with setting these boundaries as well. When you make the list, you know, you're putting down things that are valuable to you. It may not matter to other people. Chances are they don't matter to the other people, but you have to establish it yourself. And I think learning to love yourself is another form of establishing your own values. Establishing and learning to uphold your own values. So, yeah. I see these videos as things I would want my daughter to know. You know, she's becoming a teenager, she's growing up, and I feel like these are things that I want her to know. So, if anyone else can value from these little messages, cool. I don't know everything, but I do know some things, and hopefully something was said here or information was shared that you can apply to your life and enhance your experience on planet Earth. All right. I feel like we didn't really get to show much of this. I don't know, it's going to be a journey figuring out the balance between the work and the talk, but that's okay. This is what you have today. I hope you enjoyed this message. If there's any questions or like ideas you might have to add to this, feel free to comment it. You know, I'm always open to talking and learning new perspectives on things like that. And yeah, here's the completed version of this piece. Have a great day. I'd just like to say thank you so much for watching this video, and if you liked it, I would very much appreciate if you hit the thumbs up. I think it seems to help in this YouTube world. If not, just let me know what you did not like and what you would like to see, and that would really help me shape this channel. Thank you so much for taking the time, and stay tuned for what's to come. Thank you so much. Bye.